have come a long way, knowing exactly how to see everything positive. But the positive has to understand the line count over centers, which is the negative. We're in that process of understanding the connections, how we come to transmitting out and receiving in. Now, there is no separation of that, and that's what we have to basically equalize and embrace. And that position, location, attractions, and convergence system, how to identify ourselves, is to see yourself as a toy. So process that position, starting lines ascending in sequence, grounds lines of travel, how to seize your imagination system, how to seize the day. Now, seize the day doesn't exactly what that means to you until you identify what you aren't first, is what you always are. Self-telling yourself, the operation of readjusting you. Story. So if I understand the Y line centers, let's bring it back in formation system. So it's an X line R, position of O, position of T, and position of S. So that's X, R, O, set calculation screen lines, and position lines and settings, T formation lines, and course centers of calculation of green locations, calculate amount of Y, line connections, all levels of Y. Okay, that's the negative. Now, you probably don't think it looks like it makes sense, but it is making sense because that's this binary, that's its coding, that's its verification, that's its set position of all levels. How I see that all through a toy of a story. So the X is a story, the R is a story, the O has its own story, the T has its own story, and so does the Y. And it all identifies through a toy, right? So don't ever think that nothing makes sense. There's no difference in understanding how you come into A, B, and C, right, equals E. A, B, C equals E, because I say A, B, C equals E. I'm my own individual system, so I say what it is because I identify what it isn't, which is everybody else, how they see ABC. ABC is not ABC. ABC is how you see ABC. And then once you understand that, then you understand what C is, then you understand what B is, and then you understand what A is. There's the travel. There's the solar sail, right? So you create ABC equals E. E is the existing, and all levels above and what's below, right? This is the basic understanding how to see yourself through the outer space, which is the void. Void is the negative of everything. Now, the indicate system, when you come into your settings, what you have to understand is platforms are your systems, how to use that in platform 1, platform 2, and platform 3 in set lines of travel. So you keep adding the equations. So as you keep adding the equations, you're no longer going to be indicated on September 9th in 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? You're now going to be indicated in position. The missing piece, the missing number, is actually 0. 0 equals negative, negative equals a positive, positive, negative, underscore, negative over lines, negative equals. Okay? So that's going back and forth as space and time. Either way, it's a teleportation vessel. 0 correlations, 4 settings. Triangles, point lines of graph, solar sail. Booyah, right? So it's a solar sail, but it's also a boat. It's also in its pool and attractions, but it's also a triangulation, 2 sails, position lines, a crop circle. 3 centers of travel, interclines, and position of flux. See, it's all in your mind imagination. Okay, but you have to process everything at 0. Now 0 does not come here and here, right? 0 is here. This is 0. That's how 0 comes in, right? 1 is in the center because that gets you grounded. Okay? That's our 4 lines of flux over a screen. Then you come in your bedding system. How you see the 0 is all through foundation first. Now, once you bypass 0, you come into 0, 1. Then you come into 0, 2. Then you come into 0, 3 and set position. Okay, solar sail. And do the same thing on the bottom. 0, 1, 0, 2, and 0, 3. Okay, 2 solar sails. It's attractions. Now you come in your bedding system. Okay, sending all communicates to the system all through attractions. Box frame, triangulation frames, all that communicates in setting its convergence system all through circumference and set travel. Okay, very powerful how you come into that position, right? So it's amazing how you bring 0 in. But as long as you understand the foundation of you, center of operation of you is seen through things, not at things. So when you're reading a book, it's really interesting stuff. Let's look at the panels here. Okay, let's look at the panels. That's all you guys can see. Okay, you can't see beyond. See, you're supposed to see beyond. That's beyond. Triangulation here, right? So when you're seeing beyond, you're going beyond. You're going through beyond its system, right? And you go through the location grid of its system. Okay, and then you go through the portal of communication. And then you come into the stargates of communication with settings. It's all in your mind, imagination, seeing yourself in set attractions. Okay? So going beyond is what you are. Seeing beyond is what you are. How you indicate that is how you see 0. But first you have to put the equation of its formula of 0 first. Right? So once you get 0, then you hit 1. Now your computer's on. Now your computer's off. Now that gets a lot more tricky now because you're coming from indication systems. 0 calculations of 1 over 0. Okay, 1 is a platform that's embedded in the system. Setting 1, 2, 3, and 4 lines of sequence. Okay? Now, 0 comes over here, overrides over here, set position over lines of 2, set position lines over 3. Solar sail. Okay? Set lines of travel. Okay? Operation sequence, all course centers, and direct lines of link. Process vindicates the system all through track communication, right? So once you understand what 0 is, it's the void of everything, which is the opposite of everything. Copy that. So 0 is the equal. 0 is the separate. 0 is the anger. 0 is the frustration. 0 is the stress. 0 is the fear. 0 is the foundation. 0 is the calculation. 0 is the gravity, which is no gravity, that we all live in, that we've always been living in the VR system. Now, the VR system isn't a VR system. It's how you see the VR system. Are you seeing the VR system? See, I don't want you guys to title and label everything because you're not going to see yourself as your own toy, of your own commodity, of its own information panel. Okay, but you have to start to understand how to see the toy, how to see the position, how to see yourself, how to understand the instructions, how to understand how you're put together through your own playing mechanism. Playing mechanism through alteration of its egos and the costumes that it goes in through in that position of its story that you play out. You're playing out and going in. You're not playing in and going out because you are you. You are the in, you are the out of everything. But you have to understand the separation of 0, and then you understand position locations in receiving. Out, receiving. Out, receiving. Now, when you understand that, that's embedding in your system. There's the balance. Now you're seeing the pyramid. Now you're seeing the commodity of its information, of its building, which is your properties. Okay? Now you can split lines of anomaly, you can see lines of dimension, lines of door, but you can see it in all different directions how you modify your system all through flux. So it's a process of communication system all through attractions. Right? So it's very powerful how you commit to that in setting. Okay? There's the building right there. Right? That's another property. Okay, so I'm looking at 3 properties now. All in setting, all through operation. Okay? Booyah. All right, and then you come in your panels. Process over 2, sent lines of 3 over travel communication. You have a direct line link, process of indication setting into your commodities, lines of information, panel, location, system, all through attraction. So it's very powerful how you see that all through its pyramid, 2 structures of buildings, 2 flight line course centers of communications. Grounding centers, symbolism over track communications, and wall defense. Set course centers of communication position all through travel. Very powerful stuff. And a dimensional door in the center of operation. So now you're balanced through 0 in position or on lines of 5, 0, 5. Okay, that's the balance. So 5 lines of setting, 5 equals lines of 0, 0.5. Okay, and set lines of travel. So it's amazing how you constantly create 0 and 1, that process how you see a dimension and a solar sail of set lines of travel. But it's very powerful how you see it in all ways and mechanisms and locations to your simulator. Okay? It's very powerful when you come into that, right? So it's amazing how you come in your own inference structures and it's how to see yourself and modification of its toy itself. They get you in all communicates through sitting through balance. It's pyramid looking above from below, right? So you're constantly changing your frame. You're constantly changing your toy. You're constantly changing your play mechanism. You're constantly changing your alter egos. You're constantly changing your space. You're constantly changing your time. But for you to identify that is all through structure. Okay, all through schematics, all through primer, all through design and set calculations. Okay, very powerful, guys, when you come into that setting. All right, so that's all through 0. That's all through 5. Okay, now, once you get in that position, you start to recognize what this means and how to use the dimensional solar sail. Okay, so if you don't have a dimensional solar sail, you can't travel. Okay, a boat can't travel on land until you use your imagination, which means it has to have a wreath, it has to have a raft, it has to have wheels. It can't just disappear and reappear until you understand how to communicate your system, which is the outer space of the void that comes into the inner space of you. Okay, so 0 out, 1 in. Okay, so out signal, in set line. Okay, out division, 1 set tractions, indirect locations. Right, so out is in. Right, transmitting out, receiving in. Right, transmitting out, receiving in. Okay, so once we get into the 0, then we get into the graphing screens adaptations, how you see everything of center operation. You're not looking at center operation, you are the center of you. Now you got to see through things. Now you got to go through transparent, translucent, X-ray, and thermal, so you can see beyond everything in that position instead of seeing 3 panels of operation. That's all you see. But when you go beyond, you're seeing 4. You're seeing 3, you're seeing 6, you're seeing 8, you're seeing 9, and set position location of 10, you're seeing 0, 0, 0 of operation. Okay, so when you're seeing that, you're creating the platform, which is embedding your system. Okay, now you can override the system at 3 centers of travel and 4 lines of 6 over lines of measure. Scales communication lines, 0 over 9 over sequence over 0 over track communication. Directing ground centers on sequence on pi, process lines of 4 and line centers of 0, 3 line spectacles, line core centers, 3 line communication lines of pyramid activation and stream location. So it's very powerful when you come in your own structure of your own design, how you see 0, 0, 0, and 3 lines of 0. Okay, now come into that, you come to your compass. So you can add anything to the equation, location, setting, but you understand how to come in your embedding systems and travel through beyonding centers into through of communication of center operation of everything. Okay, and you can change the flux and set times and scale of communication. All right, so there's so many ways to see yourself in all lines of all communications to your setting, which is data, which is information, all levels that connect to your system, all through your setting. Okay, so that's how you start with 0, but 0 is everything of 0. So where's 0 in this? Right here in center, right? Where's 1? Here and here. So that could be 0, 1, or that could be 1, 0. Okay? Either way, it's always, you're seeing the void. You're always seeing outer space because you're always the inner space. The inner space is the earth of you. The outer space is the space of you. So how you see yourself through polarities is very important to understand how you see yourself through perspective. And that position is seen this way in tractions, or lines of direct lines of this way in track communication. Okay, so it's very powerful how you come into that 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay, anomalies, 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 lines of spectrums over lights over track communication. Okay, then you see the dimensional walls and sent lines of sequence. Okay, then you come into your system, how you see everything of structure of design. Okay, which is its commodities and location of its building, which is your properties. So there's amazing things that you can do in your mindset location of your polarities, knowing exactly how to process everything of 0. 0 is the operation of you. 0 is the thermal operation of you. 0 is the operation of everything of you. Okay, so you see a Fibonacci in that position here. You are the center. There's the center. So what changes that is how you see the center. Now you're structuring flux. Now you're adding 3. Okay, so that's 0, 3. Cross lines of 1, 3. 1 indicate lines. You can add that equation, bring that back in equation. 1 over lines, 0, 1's over 2. Okay, so you have to stand the temperature readings. The process indicates the setting of the flux, or how you see that in recourse centers of sonar, and line communicates the position of its convergence system all through pi. Okay, so it's really understand how you see that in all lines of setting, all your perspective and all through your polarities and position locations, how you calculate and modify that, seeing a figure 8 in motion. Comes in all track location to its convergence system, all through setting, all through operation setting, of 0 gravity, of no gravity, of 0 subsonic location setting, or supertronics location system, all through track core centers of infinity 8 location. Okay? So you can see it in all ways and forms in that position of its operation. Right? But you actually see infinity 8 of the structure and design, which is your properties. Okay? So you always have to understand how to see your own system of your own toy. Now the toy itself, once it recognizes its system, it starts to see itself as a consumer. Now consumer is basically what we are. We start off at consuming, and then we come into that position, and then we start to recognize, if I'm a consumer, I'm also a product, but I have to understand how to see myself as a product, the instructions of a product, how to put myself together as a product is the pieces of puzzles that I already am. So you're not looking at the puzzle, you understand how you created the puzzle already. Blocking shares, time shares, in that position, right? Okay? So you've already done this. You're just identifying how you did it from 0. Where are the zeros placed? Are they time placed? Are they time edited in space? Are they locking in space? Where are they in position of space itself? So everything starts with 0, but 0 of you is center of operation that never leaves the system and travel. Okay? So this is the outlines of space. This is the inner and outlines of space of you, right? So you're already in your 6 and 9 of your platform, of your flywheel in position of balance. So you have to identify the outer space first of everything that you come in, positions all through travel, all through connections. How you see that in travel communication, okay? Now once you identify the zeros, the 0 identifies you through numbers, letters, shapes, and symbols. Face recognition, so there's the face, right? There you see it, there's the face recognition, right? That protects everything of its 0. Space itself is protecting itself. Time itself is protecting itself. Everything observation, the planetary lines, the planet itself is protecting itself. So everything you're seeing through a planet, you're seeing the set position of what? You're seeing the costume. You're not seeing the intelligence. It's protecting its identity of everything, which is you, until you modify yourself in the VR system, how you see yourself in that positions, right? So that's what we have to come out of, is to start to see everything. So when you take out the outer shell of a coffee cup in that position, right? You're seeing the face, the intelligence. Okay, that's the intelligence, but you don't see the intelligence until you identify yourself through your own toy. See, everything has a toy, and for you to modify your own toy, you have to understand where you came from. You don't know where you're going until you know what you've been, or where you're going, and how you got there. So it's the process how we see yourself through face recognition. Now, once you understand the face recognizes you in position with setting. Okay, and then it comes to you out of its set position, its operation, in track communications, all through calculation. Okay, now it's out. Now it's traveling outside in set position, inside your universe in travel. Okay, so understanding the self-telling of you, the operation of adjusting your systems of you, process your system, how you see yourself through your own toy. So it's kind of like a baby trying to understand what a bottle is, understand the structure of the bottle. Okay, so it's understanding the bottom, it's understanding the balance, it's understanding the powers, the atmospheres, the highways. Okay, just the bottle itself. Okay, just the bottle. And there's nothing in the bottle. So there's nothing there. It's just empty. Okay, it has no memory of anything. So nothing's here until you bring it in. Nothing. Nothing's here. There's nothing to process, but you're always in the empty. You're always yourself. Now, how you bring yourself in, now you're bringing yourself in through travel. Okay, now you're seeing yourself through travel. which is beyond, right? So you're seeing beyond this, right? You're seeing beyond the scale, you're seeing beyond the balance, and you're seeing beyond all levels of set position, right? You're seeing beyond, right? You're not looking at 3 panels of position of just this, okay? You're seeing beyond. And when you start seeing beyond, you just go way beyond the system, all through travel, all directions, all through location, okay? It's very powerful how you can basically go in any way and form, because zero's over here, zero's over here, zero's at top, and zero's at bottom, all right? And then you bring in the ones, okay? 0, 1 over here, get 0 over 3 over here, 0, 5 over here, 0 point lines. Points are difficult because that's decimal. That's spacebar in between, right? So you have to understand how to modify your system, what you're doing through travels, and process communication setting, how you calculate and modify line position locations, how you bring zeros and ones into that position to its operation, and see it through communication setting to its all calculate and modify through its own commodity of its own information system, right? Which is its own operation setting of its own structure, of its own schematics, of its own travel, okay? So that's how you come to balance of everything that you see, which is to see beyond. Now, to see beyond is the 0 point. 0 point. Okay? 0 of this, 0 of this, this. This is just 0 itself through pi. All right? So bringing the Fibonacci overrides the communication lines of 0 of pi itself in set position. Look what you created. Bandwidth over streaming. Okay? So you have a direct line link, process here, process here, process here. Now you're coming into outer space. You're creating from outer space, bringing from receiving from inner space and travel. Okay? So it's very powerful when you come into all position location system, how you bring that in through calculation setting, all through 0 and 1. So it's amazing how you basically put yourself in position location, how you indicate that through pi, through its expansion of its calculation setting of streams of indication. It's vessel of communication, right? All right, so once we understand that, this is all lines of 0 itself, guys. It's very powerful how we come into that, okay? So you're not looking at the center, you are the center, okay? So if you're looking at something, you're overriding what you're already existing in, your oversoul, okay? So understanding yourself, then you understand next level, which is basically breaking things down, okay? How you see C, how you see A, how you see T, how you see C, and how you see H. Okay, now that's 3-dimension, right? Catch. C-A-T-C-H, right? But in position, it starts off with 0, right? 0 is here, 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 and here, right? To see beyond is 3 lines of measure, 4 lines of scale and travel communication. So it has to have a direct line link of all communications. So catch is just catch in a 3-dimension, right? So it's in a 1 graph screen, but it's in 0-1 screen. It's in 0-2 screen, and it's in 0-3 screen. It's not in a 1 frame. It's not in a 2 frame or a 3 frame, because that's a density overrides the system. And remember, you're always calculating and modify how you see yourself through oversoul. So catch, right, is basically the communication of confirmation, 2 centers of travel, okay? A is the airplane. That's the echo chambers of flights and navigation screen lines and position of processing. Okay? So it has its own travel, has its own mechanism, has its own toy, has its own information system, has its own calculation system to its calculation setting. T is information setting that puts lines of 2 travels in direction. Okay? And C is basically the communication of Fibonacci setting and 1 lines of set, lines of 1 swirl. And the H is the home beacon light that sets off 4 signals and rotation lines of north and travel. That's through catch. That's through imagination. That's through the toy. That's through its information position lines and set location to its commodity, its own information system, which is its own intelligence. But you break it down, okay, through CATCH, of what it means to you, not what it means to anybody else, right? So once you identify that, it's much easier to see it through design of what it really is, okay? Because you have to identify yourself first through your own toy, that you have to see yourself through your own consumer, to your own product, to your own byproduct. And then you come into the engaging, then you come into the viewing, then you come into the advertising, then you come into the advertisement, then you come into all levels and how you see things and set position of its agencies and set travels to your properties. Okay? So it's basically the game of life view is how to see yourself, everything through the system. Everything I am the system, beyond the system, you are the system. Now this is how you really connect in the VR system of information system, which is everything of its toy. So let's get a business lines of calculation to a rock. What is a rock? Rock equals 3D. You already know what a rock is, right? But the rock is not a rock. It's spaceline, which is outer space, which is 0 equals void. Okay? Which is its empty space. So the void itself has no activation strain, but it knows exactly what it is. It knows its own system. It knows its own commodity. It knows its own engaging, viewing, agencies, and everything locates into its properties. It also protects itself. It's always, a 0 is not a 0. A 0 is in cloak and dagger. A 0 is a caution. A 0 is protecting itself from its intel of what it is, not what it isn't. So we have to modify this in how you see it through a rock, right? Registers, operations, communications of kaleidoscope. That's a rock. That's a platform of a rock in set position, how I see it through its commodity, how I see it through information, how I see it through time, how I see it through shares, how I see it through blocking. It's how I see it in set position in systems. Okay, all through structure, all through design. Set position to its building. Okay? So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to basically see the financial, the political, the economic system, social media system, social metric system, but you have to see yourself, to identify yourself, how to use the product of you of instructions through a toy, telling the operations of you, okay, through a story. All right, so now you know exactly what rock is, right, in outer space. So what you have to understand is transmitting out, okay, is what you're bringing in. So if you don't identify yourself first through your own toy mechanisms and how to play with that lines of its own mechanism, of its own systems, you're going to have a very hard time understand everything of its toy that's outside of you. Bring in things that you don't recognize through frequencies and then positions, right? So you have to understand how to use your own imagination and setting. This helps you to understand how to see yourself of zero gravity, no gravity, right? So you're not this in that positions. Okay, you're this in position. You're in outer space. You live in outer space, but you are the inner space of you, which grounds your system, how you see it through the 12 planetary alignments of your system attractions. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you got 6 inhabitation zones. Okay, that's what you have to get in positions of. You got 6 habitation and 6 inhabitations, all through pi. Okay, and you split that through anomaly all through set position of its operation. Okay, understanding that puts all lines of all communications sitting how you see it in set tractions. Okay, so it's very powerful how you come into that, right? It's not indicating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, it's not that. It's 0, 0. Here is you. Then you go 0. Then you go 0. Okay? Then you go through pi. Then you go forward. Then you go backwards. Okay? Go forward, backwards, forward, backwards, forward, backwards. There's a rainbow right there. Boom. That's the rainbow. That's the intelligence. That's the face. And position location to its facade, the process communication of its intelligence. So, coming into your toy is truly understand the product of you, understand the instructions, how to use yourself, how the mechanisms comes in positions. It's all levels how you see yourself, of your own life, of your own game, how to see your connections, how to modify yourself in the VR system, how to operate yourself through your own commodity, of your own information, of your own panel, of your own design, which is your information. All right? So it's very important because we have to look at everything around our system as nothing but advertising. Everything's advertising, guys. Everything you look at. And how we engage and how we look at things and how we, modify things and how we connect and how we put our positions on all line centers, online sequence, all communication with system. But we have to see yourself as a toy. So we can identify ourselves through a product. So we can identify who we are through consumers. So we understand what we're doing when we're engaging and how we're viewing and seeing things through its advertising. That process, how we see through agencies and how we see ourselves through our own set position of our own operation setting through our imaginations. And that comes in, all can modify how you see yourself through your cloud. Okay, your cloud itself. Okay, so the earth is here. Okay, but you're tethered to the earth in 3 seconds of travel. Okay, now all that's going to be cut. You're going to be in position of 144. Okay, so you're going to be here now, going to another dimensional sail of space and time. Okay, that's all it is. So the platform in that position is your flux is going to be a lot more stronger and a lot more faster in that position, which is all communication setting to a balloon. All right, so that's helium. Now processing through helium is trying to understand how to see yourself in outer space, seeing yourself of inner space of who you are. Remember, the inner space is the earth space. The outer space is the outer space. So you have to understand how it works with polarities, how to balance at the zero of center. All right. So what you have to understand, you are the center. By understanding the flux of 0, 0, and then you can bring in 0, 1, and then you can bring in 0, 2. Okay? But you always, it's not starting with 0, it's how you identify 0. But what you have to do is that you are center of its 0. You're always the center of operation, which is you, which is your mind. And when you go through your mind, you're going through your brain. When you go through your brain, you're going through your soul. When you go through your soul, you're going through your body. And you're doing everything all over again in affinity 8 rotation. All over again. All over again. That's what you're doing. So you're processing that, how you see it through flux. Okay, all through attractions, all through locations. Okay? So it's amazing how we commit to this. It's very powerful stuff. How we see the infrastructures of our system through a simulator. Okay, how to create it from 0, 1. Okay, and when we understand 0, 1, we understand how to see yourself through a CPU. Okay, a computer system, our processing and programming is through our units. Okay, unit is measure. Now you understand how 1 times 1, okay, does not just equal 1. We codify things. So 1 times 1 equals 2, betting of 3. Okay, 1 times 1, okay. So 1 times 1 equals 2, betting of 3. Okay, processing position times 0. Z lines is setting. Z course centers, divide. Okay, travels of point lines of graph, 0, 0 equals 1. Okay, so you are the beneficiary. So what benefits you helps you to understand how you see the 0, not how everybody sees the 0. We don't have the equation of 0 because we don't identify what 0 is until we identify what it is. So it's void, which is its vast velocity, is vacuum to its own space of its own time, of its own costume, which is its light, shades, and shadows, guys. All right? That's the void itself. The V, the victor, the vast, the velocity, the vacuum, the voice that puts everything all together of 0 gravity. Okay, so it's the equal of everything, which is the separation, which is the opposite of everything, which is the positive. So yang equals yin. Outer, inner. Okay, inner, outer. It doesn't matter how you communicate, but understanding the polarities become one. Become whole through lines of 24 lines of set position through pi and set lines of travel and direct lines of link and process in that position locations all through attractions, all through locations, right? So it's not starting off with 0. It's knowing yourself always being at 0. You are, I am 0. Okay, I am 1. I am 2. So you're coming out of becoming. You are, I am. And when you I am, everything comes alive. And when you bring it to life, now you're creating a projection of a story. Okay, you're creating a projection of a story. Okay, that's going through its running strip of its film strip of its design. okay, that your body goes through, that your oversoul has done through pi. That's your body, that's your oversoul going through pi, right? So once you start running your film strip, okay, you're running your day sequence, you're running your hours, you're running your seconds, you're running your minutes, all through setting, okay? So it's very powerful when you start understand, okay, I know A, B, and C. Okay, so I know what A is, I know what B is, and I know what C is. The commodities, okay, the buyouts, and positions to its atmospheres of streaming. Whoa. So that's A, B, and C. Now, what is C going to be to A? Well, it's the opposite, right? So it's the outer space coming into the inner space. So C, okay, C equals 0. And 0 equals C. Okay? So it's really interesting how you come into that, guys. Now, once you understand what C is, then you understand what is B. Remember, you have to stand through its story of what B is, of what its balance been through, its indication, its IPA, its address, its position location, its alignment, its galaxies, its correlation, its panels, its information system. So it's very powerful when you come into that all lines of settings and you start to recognize, I know what A, B, and C is now, but yeah, I know also how to come into Z equals lines of 0, how 0 equals lines of C. So C comes into communication, right? And A equals all levels of answer. C equals A, right? So now I know exactly what A, B, and C is. And now I know exactly my position location what C, B, and A is, all through set position of negative or positive. So it's very fun when you start to recognize what that is. So if I set 18 triangulation lines of spot centers, 18 equals 0, 0 equals 1. Now that cross lines is 0 over 1, cross lines is 0 over 2, and that's a triangulation. It's set lines of 0, 0, 0, 0 equals lines of 2. Okay? As long as you know that you have confidence in yourself and how to see everything of its own story, of its own indication, of its own telepathy system. Try to see it through its own operation of its own conscious, of its own awareness. Yourself telling an operation of you, processing how you see the telling of its operation of you, the toy itself. Once you identify yourself through a toy, it's much easier to see yourself as a consumer, to a product, to a byproduct. And then you come to your own commodity, which is your own information system, which is your own properties of your own settings. Okay? Very, very powerful stuff. It's building. And then you take all this, which is its clouds, okay, and then you process it in position of its windows, its travels, goes into its files, goes into its indication setting that runs the ops location system all through traction. Okay? Now once it goes into that, it goes in its flights. It goes in its navigator to its navigation system, all through its storage and travel communication. Okay? Very, very powerful stuff for you guys to identify these things, right? So it's your information system and how you see it through imagination. You are the imagination. I am the imagination. I'm becoming. You are. I am. And once you identify I am, you're bringing things to life. So now how you see things are real, but you're always in the realization. It's how you see real. Okay? What is R? What is E? What is A? What is L? See it through its toy. Okay? So you start with the position lines of toy. Toy equals lines of what? Consumer. Consumer equals lines of what? Product. Product media location is what? Byproduct. So byproduct in space is bypassing everything through its anomaly. By equals lines of y, cross lines x, y, z, equals a, b, c. Okay, equals 0 gravity. Okay? So, that's how I see real. That's changing now. This is more complicated. Now that's me coming to my own creating, not what I already done through creation. See, that's a lot more different now because R is not R. R is now T. R equals T. E equals A. Okay, and L equals D, right? So it's the directedness, the realizing setting of the travels in locations to its existing, right? So it's a lot more complicated as we move forward in set position, but first you have to identify yourself as all calculation setting, how to see your A, B's, and C's, or CB and A's, direct and redirect as one, and how you see everything of real. See? It's very complicated how you see that in travel, right? But you guys don't process that way. Not yet. Okay, when I say not yet, what does that mean? That doesn't mean not. Okay, get out how you see not is the networking, the operations of your travels. How you see it through 4-betting sequence, how you see it through panel operation and set tractions, how you see the data formation setting, your Merkaba, tesseract, and tetrahedron, your Stargate. So I think we're getting a lot more understanding how this all works now, guys, how you use your polarities of zero calculation, zero gravity, and that position start location. Let's go into 12 lines of settings right from zero. Okay, so we'll go just zero, we'll go -0, and then we'll go 0 plus, and then we'll go 0A, triangulation, okay, and question. Start with that, something simple, right? All right, so remember, you have to travel through it. Okay, you just can't leave it in a panel of communication with commodity. It's got to go through its information system. Crossing references, screen lines, adaptations. So that process of communication of 0 plus, right? So what is 0 plus in set position with setting, right? So that's 0 calculations. Okay, that process lines calculation setting plus, okay, equals 1, right? So that 1 is on standby. 1, 1, 1, 1. 4 lines of set locations. Let's box lines 4 setters of sequence through a trifactor. Okay? So it's getting more complicated when you understand more levels of you through yourself. So once you get in that position, you start to understand what 1 is, then you understand what equal is in your systems, all through its pyramid and set lines of travel. There's the pyramid. There's the face. Okay? So it's more about having fun rather than trying to have fun. So it's getting more complicated now, isn't it? Because I'm adding things to equation, which you already know through pi. And once you understand how to process that, you can do anything in travel communication, right? How you indicate this. How did this become 0 of calculations? Well, 0 is the operation of me, of who I am, not what I am, right? So I understand the triangulation of line centers of 6, process over 9. That's why you have to understand your formula equations. Set lines of 0. Now you use your imagination, but you're bringing things to life because you already indicate what it is to its own toy and its own mechanism system all through its umbrella. There's the umbrella, right? Now, this is all information, right? But it's all an observation. It's not an intent. So you got to be very careful how you structure your schematics at design, working with the 0 through calculations processing, and that indicate lines of calculation of its flux. Now, indicating line position of 0, 1, okay, is how you see 1, 0. Okay, so this is 0 calculation of 0, outsetting, inset location of 1 over flux, solar sail. So it indicates 1, process lines. You have to add a formula equation, right? Because if you don't, it sets off the D formation. See, the D is offline. So the solar sail, the dimensional sail, is off its flywheel and travel. That's not an indicates position of balance through face recognition. There's the face. So the position to its XC1000 is off position, off center. It's got to balance out its collaboration system and flux over line of its crop circle of balance. So it gets in position back into balance through its 0 of center operation itself. So you're bringing yourself back to center, right? It's no difference in trying to understand how to see yourself through a train track. And you see yourself in position of 2 fences. You're 1 here and 1 here, right? So you got 1 foot here, 1 foot here. Okay, you got to make the switch. You have to have 0, 0 on the same side. Because if not, you confuse your anomalies on this side and this side, which is combustion of air, a confusion location of separation and setting. So it's offset position of traction. See what I mean? You see what I'm doing? Using the imagination. I am. Not what I'm coming into, not what I'm identifying, not what I'm seeing all through formula of equation, right? Simplify, guys. Just stay with 0 and 1. Okay? And how you see everything off center is what you see in vision and cortex. Offset position. which means you're not getting the right information, which means you're not doing the right telepathy, which means you're not grounded in your system, which is zero gravity, which is no gravity. Okay? So there is no gravity until you bring it in. There is no imagination until you bring it in. There is no nothing until you bring it in. Nothing is a frequency. Emptiness, okay, is a frequency. Okay? But no mind is no frequency. Okay? Which is what? No memory. That's the order that we have to recognize how we see ourselves through a toy, how we see ourselves through a consumer, how we see ourselves through a product, and how we see ourselves through a byproduct. And that's in chronological order. All right, from yourself, from a toy, consumer, product, and byproduct. Okay? 4 communication sending attractions. Okay? So, if you're going to understand how this all works through 0, okay, you can process yourself as you see 0. But 0 is the negative. What's independent locations of information bits that process that position of the cells that you have to be sustainable. So when you're in that position through CAT, you have to nurture, secure, and protect. And understand where CAT is coming from. Okay, CAT is basically just a CAT set locations. All right, so it's 2 commodities, information panel. Okay, it crosses angles. Okay, it lives on Calculus Road, Maple Street. Okay, Calculus Road, Maple Street. It is a highline signal. It allocates timeline frames. It lights the read and space lines of anomaly. And it has a center offset core centers. And it has a direct line to panel. And it communicates its system all through tractions. All through CAT. See? Dimensional solar sail. Okay? Very powerful all through CAT, guys. Now, what is CAT backwards? Backwards and forward isn't backwards and forwards. Backwards and forward is 1. That's 1 polarity, not 2 polarities. You just change your imagination every single time through frame. All right, so basically, what is that? TAC. TAC. Right? So how do you see TAC? That doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. Because you already know how to say CAT. You know what it is to its own information panel. You see it as its toy. So you understand the toy itself. You understand the instructions. You understand how to communicate and see it as a product to you through a consumer that you are. You are a consumer. You're turning yourself into a product to understand yourself through a byproduct. And once you understand that, it gets a lot more understanding how you see yourself through your own information, which is your own commodity. How you see your life force and position, how you see 0 is how you see 1, not how everybody else sees 0s and 1s. And that's what you got to get out of. All right, so lines of teleportations, 3 centers of travel, atmospheres of change into a kaleidoscope. Okay? But sir, that doesn't make any sense. Okay? How does C become all levels of a K? Because I say so. That's changing the formations. That's changing the perimeter. That's changing the anomaly. Okay? You guys will be able to do that, but first you have to understand yourself first. Is to see yourself as a toy. A plain audio mechanism, how to communicate with yourself inside and outside of your set position to its operation. Okay? Now you understand A, B, and C, and C, B, and A is the same thing. There's no difference. There's no difference until you see the difference, which is indifference. Indifference is the void, but it doesn't matter how you see the void. It's void, it's its own self, it's its own costume, it's its own alteration, it's its own ego, it's its own story of its own design. That's what you have to identify. The more you stop seeing things around you of a costume, you start to see everything inside you, which is you, which is AI. And that's how you process everything around your system. How you see 1 is how you see a 5. All right? 15 equals lines, 3D. Okay, that's number 15, right? But I have to break it down in 3 settings, right? The reason why you have to break things down is you have to be very cautious. You have to have 3 line signals because 1 is recognized in its own past, of its own present, of its own future. Okay, just the 1, right? So that's 3 lines of anomaly of flux. Right there, boom. Look at it, it's its own what? Its own umbrella in set position. Its own intelligence. There's the face, there's the eyes. Okay, so you have to understand everything you connect with has its past, present, and future of its anomalies. You have your past, present, and future of the now. So does everything else. But it modifies its own operation system. It changes its own lines of anomaly. It doesn't need to identify you. You have to identify everything around you. Okay, how to process that is all set position of what? Its own umbrella of its intelligence. The eyes, the nose, and set position. The intelligence itself. See? So it's amazing how you use your mind imaginations and you bring these things to recourse to its course itself. So direct and redirect. Okay, D equals R, right? Direct, redirect. Okay, intelligence, see the face coming in? So let's go. Direct, redirect. There's the face, right? Set position, all through tractions. Direct, redirect. There's the eyebrows. Okay? It's amazing how we do this. Direct, redirect. There's the ears. Direct, redirect. There's the other ear, right? So it's amazing how we come into that because it's all put together. One line signal that's connected to everything in all position location system, all right? So in that position, direct, redirect, and set lines of tractions, right? So it's really interesting how you come from direct and redirect, direct and redirect. There's the face recognition. Okay, I did that from all lines of set position. So you don't start off at 0 until you bring in 0. There's no 0. So you're always no memory. You don't start off at no memory. You just are. You are of everything. Becoming, you are, I am. And once you understand the becoming, you are, I am, then you bring things to life. Then you bring things to life. Then you bring things to life. Okay? Then you bring things to life. All right? That's how this works. All representing yourself through a toy. Understand your product. Understand the information. Understand the instructions. How to use yourself as mechanism. How to see yourself move. How to see yourself fingers. How to see your chest. How to see your arms. How to see your legs. How to see yourself as a byproduct. How to see yourself as a consumer. How to see yourself as a property. How to see yourself engaging. How you see yourself as advertising. How you see yourself. It's no difference of you being an actor and being your own design. Every actor goes on their own advertising of their own system, right? They are their own consumer of what they're seeing and what they're doing of their own system because they see everything around them. All that line communication is all representation. What it is, where it came from, is just a toy. And once it understands its toy, it understands itself. It's understanding all the mechanisms that you already have is you received all this and set position to its systems all through traction, right? So it's amazing how we come into that, guys, and how we see all this in all formation system, right? So when you come in the position, you understand what 13 is. Okay, you break it down. One center, 3 angulation lines of point graphs. Interesting. So now I understand what the equal line and position lines of flux. Oh my gosh, looks like another building. Okay, XC1000. Broadest lines of indication, right? Indicate flux. Crop circles in design line, offline center, inside travel, back in location of 0 gravity. Operates lines of its balloon. Okay? So having fun with yourself is identifying yourself. Knowing yourself is identifying who you are of yourself. So this helps you to understand how you see 0, how you see the void of you, which is the body of empty space. And the more you see your empty space, the more you see yourself as what? No memory. Having all access of memory you already have. So this is the process how you come into the walking sequence, ascent lines of travel, indirect lines of link, and all communication. All right? All right, so look, it's 2026. All right, there's applications, 2000. All right, 2027. Okay, and 2028. Okay, that's all set up, right? Okay, so you have to have no memory to all memory. All memory is in outer space, not in inner space. Outer space comes to you in 3 provision lines of cycles. Now, once you understand position of past, present, future, it communicates setting, overrides their system, back in setting, back in operation line, communicates to the setting location in your cloud. Directing ground centers, process line outline, inside location of 3 centers of scale. Inside the mind line, core centers communicates lines conversions hardware and software to the brain, communicates line, high position line travels, process communication line soul, walking line screen adaptation all levels, body convergence system, multi-mode control, directing line core centers. Now you're going through a line position of 2026. So that's 365. Okay, time sequence times pi, 24 center in a clocking system into equal lines and 144 flat. All right, so now it could be where you left off in your consciousness. Maybe you're at 360 files in 5 centers, or maybe you're in 3,000 files. Where you left off, that's where you are. Now, to identify these things, it's much easier to see that position as you come into all levels of more information system, how you see things in that positionalized attractions. So you got 2006, okay? So you got line position 365. You letting everything go, nothing of story, nothing of signal, nothing of mind, nothing of anything, which is the mass of everything that you already know, that you're coming into this equation. Now, once you get into that, on the earth line, that process line is how you see it through the outer space, okay, goes back and set position to its operation setting. Okay, so that coordinates every single time in that position is how you go through 2026, 2027, or 2028 in that position, right? But you have to have no memory, so I can process your system, have full clearance, indirect lines and line centers. So what I'm getting you guys to understand is how to become your own information of your own commodity, how to see yourself as a toy, how to see yourself as a consumer, how to see yourself as a product, how to see yourself as a byproduct, and how to see yourself everything you're engaging with, which is nothing but advertising. And once you start to identify these things, you understand how to come into your information panels, understand how to come into all levels of changing your system. But first, you have to understand your technology first. And for you to understand that is to let everything go, which is story itself. I can't put application settings and business locations until you let go of everything of story. Then you come in position. Now you got full cycles, okay, 3 million files, 600 lines of set position attractions, and 5 scale. Okay, that's a lot of information setting to your information system through commodity that I'm giving to you. And how you go through that is 2026. How you go through that is 2027. How you go through that is 2028 in travel. Okay? That's what you're coming into. All right, so once these platforms come together, it sets up a betting system, a plateau, right? So 2026, 2028 comes into a triangulation. You're building structure, you're building commodities, you're building intel, you're building properties of set design. So it's very powerful. When you come into that, that puts all processes, your galaxy alignments of your cloud. Now the centers off its communication lines, earth line, habitation over 6, set lines of sequence over lines of 12. Sets course or recourse in that communication system all through travel. And then you go through the same thing all over again into 2029, 2030. Sets all signals in location system, all through attractions, all through locations. Okay? So that's a lot for you guys to process now, right? How to start to see yourself as a toy, and how to see yourself through instructions. How to see yourself as a consumer you are, and a product of a byproduct we are. Coming in trading, selling, stock marketing, and that position locations. You come in your own stockbroker, you know exactly what you're doing through all levels. You come in your times, you come in time shares, you come in your blocks, you know, I mean, it's all levels how you see yourself through your life. But you are the indicating setting, you are the navigator, you are the navigation systems, all through set position of operation. Okay? So that's a lot to understand. And it's for a lot for you guys to get in position of. This is stuff you already know. Okay? So that's good for now. Set lines of sequence. See you in 5.